Let's bring in Fran Townsend, CNN's national security analyst and a member of the CIA External Advisory Board, along with Robert McFadden, former special agent in charge for NCIS and senior vice president of the Soufan Group. Thank you both for being here. Fran, let me start with you. Given what we know about this man, should he have been more closely monitored?
You know, Jake, I think we've got to be realistic about the number of people that express these views. I used to say when I was in the White House, you know, what I cared about were people who were trying to kill us as opposed to people who just hated us, right? Yeah, I mean, you have limited resources and you've got to use them very, very carefully. And so it's unlikely that this guy, as crazy as he was, as awful as he was, and as horrific as this crime is, would have risen to the level of requiring police and investigative resources. The one thing I will say is he was writing these really offensive, horrible letters to the families of soldiers who fought in Afghanistan. That might have raised the bar for this guy, but I have to tell you, there are a lot of people who express those sorts of views that don't get law enforcement attention and resources. And this underscores how easy this kind of an event is for a lone wolf and why the U.S. government is so concerned about it.
That's true, Fran, but I mean, there were criminal charges against him. We're still learning more, and we'll talk about more about this in the days to come. But it wasn't only that he preached hatred, he actually had committed acts of violence.
That's right. Although, what we know is that there was the attempt, we believe he's been charged in a case against the attempted murder of his wife, sexual assault cases, but nothing as bad as those are, Jake. Those aren't the sorts of things that raise him on the sort of scope of counter-terror forces. And I think that's the difference here. As bad as this guy was, and as much attention of a sort of local law enforcement as he had, it wouldn't have necessarily brought him onto the screen of national counterterrorism forces.
Robert, how closely can we expect the U.S. to work with Australia in this investigation? How much does Australia need our help, for that matter?
You can expect it would be a very close working relationship. When an event like this kicks off, besides right next to the safety of the hostages and ending it successfully and safely, is a deep dive, a full court press to find out about his associates after you ID him, his co-workers, family members, to try to determine or rule out that there are co-conspirators or other plots afoot. So the Australians have a terrific capability in that regard, but it's always working with the closest allies, the Five Eyes, to include the U.S. and even other regional states. So farther down the road, as we're still in speculation land, the Australians are conducting this investigation to try to rule out other plots. You can bet that there'll be a lot of information sharing and lessons learned.
Robert, obviously there have been successful homegrown terrorist attacks here, the Tsarnaev brothers in Boston, Nidal Hasan in Texas. How likely is it that something like what we just saw happen in Sydney could happen here in the U.S.?
Well, it's definitely within the realm of possibility. See, we have a really unique era we're in right now with the advent of social media and the way the Islamic State, for example, has leveraged it, this shrinking global community. It's so much more a part of our lives and presence in our lives through media and other sources. So if you have an individual or small groups where they might be taking those constructive steps towards violence, there's a whole range of different motivations. It just seems overwhelmingly right now it's this bizarre form of Takfiri Islam, but there are other, though by less percentage, situations where, for example, far right-wing extremism might be the tipping point to motivate an individual or small group to act out.
Fran, what's the next step in the investigation?
Well, there's no question. And they're going to look to see if he had any other connections. I'll tell you, Jake, sources are telling us now that this does look like it was a lone wolf, that he was sort of self-radicalized. But they will cover every avenue to make sure that he had no links to other extremists, who they might have been. Remember, he had threatened that there were 3 explosive devices in different places. I expect that they're looking to clear that and make sure that that's not accurate. There's nothing that could harm civilians when they return to their normal lives today. And they'll see if there's any international links. They'll not only look at all of his social media, but they'll work with other intelligence and law enforcement services to make sure that he didn't have links into the Islamic State directly.
All right, more to come on that. Fran Townsend and Robert McFadden, thank you both so much.